EFF MP Nqobile Mhlongo confronted the European Union delegates with the hard questions about colonialisms, reparations, African minerals, and global inequality. She asked, is Europe willing to pay reparations for the century of extracting African minerals wealthy while leaving African people poor? Will Europe acknowledge the humiliation of black African during the colonialism, including the exploitation of Sarah Batman, who was displayed naked in Europe as a freak show?
Thank you, Chair. And I think I have just about 3 questions that I would like to pose. Firstly, I think our date for meeting, it's quite telling for me. It's Africa Day, and I'm going to be quite frank with the delegation that Europe was at the center of the scramble for Africa. Our problems of Africa emanate from the Berlin Conference that saw Africa being petitioned to the 55 states that we currently have. So in light of that and what we have raised, Chair, on the AU's 2063 agenda of justice and reparations for Africans and the African descendant, what is your view on the fact that we as a committee have called in this committee and that we think Africa deserves reparations from our colonizers for their hand and the role they had played, one, in extracting our mineral resources and leaving our people more poorer, while our mineral and mineral resources have created jobs and built your economies. Would you be willing to support that you pay reparations for your role that you have played? I'll give you an example how black South African women were humiliated in Europe through taking Sarah Baartman to the freak show in Europe, displaying her body parts in a freak show in Europe. How you have played a role in humiliating African women, on how our bodies have been built by God. Would you be willing to pay reparations and support that part of you paying reparations as Europe on your role you have played?
Does the EU support radical transformation of the United Nations Security Council by giving African countries veto power and equal representation in global decision making?
Number 2, the EFF is calling that the UN Security Council should go under radical transformation by, 1, giving veto powers to African states. Would you support that call in the UN Security Council that more African states get to have veto powers as well in the UN Security Council? Because as currently stands, Africa is not well represented in the UN Security Council, and it is considered that Africa is perhaps not an equal partner in geopolitics.
Why are African minerals exported as raw material to create jobs and industries in Europe while Africa remain unemployed? Will Europe support processing African minerals inside Africa?
Now, I think lastly is the issue of, you want diplomatic relations and economic relations with Africa. But those relations should be based on mutual values and respect for one another. Now, when we trade amongst each other, it should be that our mineral resources must never leave Africa as raw materials to create jobs for your people, leaving our people unemployed. Every time we see trucks on the road going to either Durban, Cape of Good Hope, going to the ports, leaving, when we see our coal leaving Africa, when we see our gold, our platinum, our uranium, our mineral resources living as raw resources, and you don't bring your equipment into Africa in order to beneficiate the communities, in order to create jobs, so that when you take these resources, you take it as a finished product, not as a raw material that is going to create job for your people and leaving us and our people jobless. Would you be willing to have a relationship like that with Africa? Would you support a proposal like that that says that you want a relationship where you bring your machinery, you bring your equipment into Africa in order for our resources to live as finished products? When you take our resources, it must be a finished product, not a raw material that will create jobs for Europeans and leave South Africans without jobs.
Why is immigration often discussed only in relation to black Africans, while the history of European settlement and colonization in Africa is ignored? Is Europe willing to actively participate in rebuilding Africa and taking responsibility for the damage caused by colonialism? If not, why? The question sparks serious debate about justice, inequality, reparation, and African place in global geopolitics.
The issue of immigration, we've got a problem of people always when they speak about illegal immigration. Unfortunately, they don't refer to people of your skin. They always think that illegal immigrants are black naturally, forgetting that a lot of Europeans came here. They are not of African descent. They came here from 1652, arriving here in Africa at the Cape of Good Hope, passing by to look for perhaps spices in Mozambique and somewhere else. And this was used as a station where they can refuel and get food. But today, we don't see Europe participating in rebuilding Africa, not just South Africa, Africa, the entire continent, and ensuring that you pay for the crimes of colonialism that was done by your forefathers to our country. So I want to hear your views on those matters, where you stand. Would you be able to support something like that? If not, why? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable